This is Hadden Clark. He's a serial killer that has an affinity for dressing like a woman and an unthinkable taste for the flesh of his victims. Join me and DK this week as we dive into the details of how he was able to elude the police and discover the horrors 6-year-old Michelle Dorr and 23-year-old Laura Houghteling had to endure. We're going to get into some very disturbing and graphic content, so viewer discretion is advised. Let's get started. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Shadowlands. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm DK.
I got a doozy of a story for you tonight, ma'am. Cross-dressing, cannibalistic serial killer. Process that for a second. Go ahead.
Cross-dressing, cannibalistic,
Cross-dressing.
serial killer.
This is correct.
A hungry killer with a flair for fashion.
That's a very optimistic way of looking at that.
I don't know where to go with that. All right. Okay.
Well, I'm going to show you, okay? I'm going to tell you exactly where that mess leads to, okay? So it's Labor Day weekend, 1986, and 6-year-old Michelle Dorr is visiting her father for the weekend in Silver Springs, Maryland. This is a picture of Michelle Dorr, and you see she is just the cutest little thing. Look at her.
Oh,
beautiful.
Yeah. 6 years older?
6 years old. Yep. Her parents were going through a nasty divorce at the time, with child custody being at the forefront of the conversations. That's always going to be a big issue when it comes to divorce. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, unless you're just a deadbeat parent who doesn't want your kid, you're going to be in the fight, right? You know.
Yeah, but even still, some of those people, they're scum, and they would actually take and use the kid against the other, you know,
leverage. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's just scum, just absolute scum.
Well, it's a bunch of people involved, and that's typically the common thread, right?
This is true. Even though her parents weren't getting along, Michelle was always cheerful and loving. She was very friendly, and even though she didn't live with her father full time, she had managed to make her presence known in the neighborhood. She had a friend. Her friend's name was Elizabeth Clark, and she lived 2 houses down and would often play with her when she was coming over to her dad's to visit. She also had an affinity for school. So here's a picture of Michelle at Star Day.
Okay. So we're talking, I see stars. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here she loved school so much, she actually came home and she was telling her dad that when she grew up, she wanted to actually be a teacher. So
at 6 years old, she knew this?
At 6 years old, she said she knew this, but sweet kid though, either way. But, you know, kids at that age, they really, well, my kids were that age, they were just, it was innocence, man. It was just pure innocence. Like, you got to experience them experiencing things for the first time. And for me as a parent, man, I thought that was the coolest thing. So,
yeah, I mean, God, you're 6 years old. You haven't had time to mess up yet, really, right? You're like I said, it's the edge of innocence, and you know everything around you. You're just taking it in. So, I mean,
yeah,
it's almost perfection, you know.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it was. I would say probably like my favorite time with my kids, because they were. I don't know. They were everything back then. Still are to this day, but just at that age, it was just different.
Yeah.
She was at her dad's, and it was exceptionally hot that day. So her father, Carl, this is her dad, got a picture of him for us too.
Okay.
And Carl is a very nice man, as you can see. Looks like he's
kind of has a Dr. Drew look to him.
He does. He has
Dr.
like
Drew. It's Dr. Drew Pinsky. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he'd be analyzing you when he's talking to you. You know what I mean? So anyway, he's seems like a pretty nice guy. And his dad decided he was going to set up a swimming pool, one of those little plastic pools. You know which one I'm talking about? That you throw the hose in and fill it up with water. And there's always grass floating around and everything too.
I was going to say, it becomes grass filled, and then pretty much just a pond, just like a little circle of pond scum. Yeah, after a while.
It's an amazing thing. You could have that thing like sitting in the middle of the road without a blade of grass for miles around, and it'll be filled with grass in 5 minutes. I don't know from where, but it'll get there. So what he did was, because it was hot out, and actually the Indianapolis 500 was on, so he didn't want to not watch the 500. So he moved the pool over to an area in the backyard where he can kind of keep an eye on her and still watch the race at the same time.
Big race guy. Okay.
Yeah, actually,
the Indy 500, that's NASCAR, right? Or no, that's no. The other kind
they're
of cars.
Indy cars.
That's what they're called, Indy cars, right?
Well, I don't know if they are. I've been to the Indianapolis 500, and I was always one of those guys that was like, oh, watch a bunch of cars drive around in a circle, sign me up. But
500 times, yeah.
Well, it's not 500 times because I think the track is longer than a mile, so it's 500 miles. So, but in any case, it's actually not. It's a lot of fun, man. You got to go. I've been to the Brickyard 400, the Indianapolis 500 when I used to live out in Indianapolis. It was a lot of fun. Great time.
Yeah, I confess I've been part of one of those. Yeah.
Oh, so then, redneck. So the race is long, so Carl would periodically take a peek into the yard to make sure everything was okay with Michelle. But after some time had passed, when he looked out at the pool, the water was still and Michelle wasn't in it. He immediately ran out of the house and he's yelling her name, but she's not answering. He's thinking maybe she ran into the bathroom or she's in the house and she walked past him while he was distracted and he just didn't see her. He goes back in the house and starts calling for her again and again, but still no answer. He's trying to rationalize where she might be, and he remembers her friend Elizabeth. You know what that feels like as a kid? I mean, you get that pit in your stomach, man, when you can't find one of your kids for a second. Oh,
yeah.
Jeez. Dude.
Yeah.
He must have been dying at this point. He's thinking to himself that she must have heard Elizabeth and went over her house to play. So he heads towards Elizabeth's house, which is just 2 doors down. And he can hear
they're
kids.
Close, then they're right. Okay,
oh, yeah, they're
right
2 doors down.
Okay.
They're neighbors. And he can hear kids playing in the background, in the backyard of Elizabeth's house. So he gets that, oh, thank God. So he gets there and he bangs on the door. And Elizabeth's father, Jeff Clark, he answers the door. Carl's just like, hey, looking for Michelle. She was in the backyard. By any chance is she in the backyard with Elizabeth? And Jeff said, no, actually, we've been out all day. We just got home just a few minutes ago. Kids are in the backyard, but I haven't seen Michelle all day. That's where Carl's really getting that pit in his stomach because that was it. I mean, if it wasn't that she was at Elizabeth's house and she's not in their house, then he's freaking out at this point. Well, I mean, what would you do at that point? What would you be doing?
Dude, besides like throwing up in my mouth, I just thought of this just makes me almost dizzy, right? This actually happened on a public beach to me. And my son was there the whole time and it was 4th of July and we took our eyes off him for a second and then he was gone. And
your oldest boy?
My oldest boy. Yeah. He must have been 6 or 7 years old at the time. And my wife's going bananas. I mean, there's hundreds of people down. This is literally on the beach. We're 5 feet from the water. It's, that we're watching the fireworks and everything. And my wife is it's a blood curdling screaming his name everywhere. And he was like 50 feet away, but there were so many people, couldn't see him, couldn't find him. It was loud. Yeah. So yeah, your heart just goes to 1,000 different, like 1,000 beats per minute. Your mind goes to 100 different places all in a nanosecond. And if you're, like I said, if you're anything worth it of a human being as a parent, in this case, you can't be rational. You just start to panic. So I can't imagine what this guy's feeling like. Yeah.
That's every parent's worst nightmare. Parent's worst nightmare. It really is. So I feel for the guy.
Yeah.
So, well, of course he calls the police. So the police come and they start to investigate and, they walk the house in the neighborhood. They're looking for clues, but they come up with nothing. They interview all the neighbors again, still come up with nothing. They organized what some are calling to be the largest task force in the town's history to actually find this girl. And when I say large, I mean they had people on horseback, they had motorcycles, they had people on foot, in cars, in trucks. They were combing the area. I mean, it was a big thing. She's 6 years old.
They're in a small town, right? Like they're not like in a big city, right? Like they're in
Silver Spring, actually not too far from Cape Cod. So they're up in
relatively small town. So everyone knows pretty much everyone, and that's like losing one of their own. Yeah. So
yeah, it absolutely is. Absolutely. Well, at this point, with no evidence to go on, and Carl being the last person to see his daughter, he immediately becomes the top suspect. Man, you know the cops have to do that, but
they have to. I mean, in the moment, if you're the parent, you're thinking you've got to be kidding me, right? Like this is my child. But then there's got to be a part of you that says, good, they're not leaving any stone unturned. I know I didn't do anything, and I know I'm desperate to find my child. So do what you need to, so we can get on to looking beyond me, you know? So I feel like for some people, that's probably what goes through their mind in this instance.
There's always the other side of the coin too, where you could be going, the longer you are focusing on me, the more time you could be spending looking for the real killer.
That's right.
But they don't know. Yeah. I mean, you have to let them do their due diligence.
Right?
You know what I mean?
In this case, right? Yeah, because we don't know what happened.
No,
at this point, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, so she could have just wandered off. I mean, got lost.
True. I mean, she's not there all the time. So at 6 years old, how good at navigation were you? I know I wasn't.
And what? Take me again. I'm sorry. What year is this?
This is going back. Judging
by that picture, it's probably the early 80s.
It is
late 70s. I mean, the doll, the picture of her and the doll.
Yeah,
that looked like maybe like a Raggedy Ann. Okay, so it's a mid 80s. So this person's not today, not much younger than me. Say mid 40s. The reason I asked that is it's the 80s, right? So
right.
Listen, if you got hurt and you came home, your parents said, did it fall off? Is it still connected to you? Good. Then throw some dirt on it and walk it off. You're going to be fine. Nowadays, everybody rushes everybody to the hospital every time they sneeze. So the parenting of baby boomers versus the parenting of the Gen Xers is quite different, right?
Well, yeah, without a doubt.
So
absolutely.
back then, a child wandering around at 6 years old in the neighborhood probably was very, very common, very common. And
yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. And the police are probably like, well, she's a kid. She's out playing. She's somewhere. Right. So.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, Carl never would have hurt his daughter. He loved his daughter to death. I mean, he thought the world of her. She was the center of his universe, the apple of his eye, whatever you want to call it. But they never found anything on him. So he was cleared anyway. But it's still, I mean, I just feel for the guy. You're daughter's missing, and then you're the top suspect.
Yeah.
Oh man, that dude didn't sleep for a while.
A lot of different emotions, anger and fright and everything else. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the only other person that was suspicious that lived in the neighborhood at the time was a man by the name of Hadden Clark.
Hadden Clark. Enter the antagonist. Okay. I'm guessing at this point. Yeah.
All right. Now, Hadden is her friend Elizabeth's uncle and was living with Elizabeth and her father 2 houses down from Michelle.
So this is her friend's uncle?
Yes. So her friend Elizabeth, this is her uncle.
Mr. Clark's brother.
Yeah. So Jeff Clark's brother, Hadden.
Right.
So Hadden has a bit of a colored past, which is why the police were suspicious of him. The police bring him in for questioning, and when they do, he becomes agitated and tells them that he was at work and doesn't know anything. The longer they question him, the more annoyed he seems to get and started to get physically ill whenever Michelle's name was mentioned.
Like,
they said he was getting diarrhea.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
wow, okay.
And stuff like
Even
that.
Worse. Okay. That's a little strange, man.
Oh, without
That's a
a
little
doubt.
strange.
Yeah, and the police, they see that he's obviously disturbed whenever they start talking about it, or whenever they start to mention her name, he's actually getting physically ill. So they're starting to, they're connecting some dots here, and they're going, we feel like he's definitely involved in this somehow. They're starting to put a little bit more pressure on him. They're really starting to dig in on him. And Clark's at his breaking point by this time, and he says that he may have seen her or done something that day, but he can't remember.
Wow. Okay. So credibility isn't number one priority for him, apparently.
No, but keep in mind, he's not mentally stable, and they know this. So you almost kind of have to take what he's saying with a grain of salt, and you're going to see what I mean in just a second.
Okay.
Because although that wasn't exactly confession, the cops finally felt like they were onto something.
Okay.
However, like all the other efforts so far, it turned out to be a dead end. See, what happened was they were able to go back, and initially he said, I was at work. I don't know anything. Well, they went and checked with his work, and he actually was at work. So he had an alibi. Ironclad. It was locked up. They had to let him go. There was nothing that they could do. I mean, he was obviously clear. Why he would say, I may have done something, blah, 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 I don't know. But that's what he decided to do. Here's a picture of Hadden, by the way. That's Mr. Hadden right there.
Okay. He's got, I don't know if he's the bad guy here or not, but I can tell you that he's got snake eyes. A glimmer of just darkness in someone's eyes. That
I don't know.
They don't have to say a word.
He's not babysitting my kids anytime soon.
No.
They realized that he couldn't have been in two places at the same time, so he was cleared, and once again, the police were at a dead end. With all leads exhausted, the case just went cold until a few years later, when in October of 1992, Laura Houghteling went missing only a few miles from where Michelle went missing. This is Laura.
A little bit older. All right. What's she, like 13, 14?
Well, let's see.
Maybe 14, 15.
That's your guess?
That's my guess.
All right. Laura was a 23-year-old, intelligent, almost 6 foot, slender, and absolutely beautiful young woman whose entire life was ahead of her. 22? She had recently graduated Harvard and returned home for a new job she had secured in Washington, D.C.
Wow. Okay, so not 12 or 13. Wow. Baby face. So she was in the vicinity where Michelle was last seen years later.
Yeah, I want to say maybe 10, 20 mile radius with of Silver Spring, I think it was.
Gotcha.
So, all right. She had moved back home with her mother a few months earlier in June to save money and have some stability while she started her new job and life. On or around October 19th, Laura's mother, Penny Houghteling, had to go out of town for a work conference. This is Penny.
Okay.
Laura's mom.
Okay.
All right. Laura didn't show up for work on the Monday following that weekend. Although Laura had only been at her new job a few months, she was known for being responsible, punctual, and would never show up for work without letting someone know what was going on. You got to figure, graduating from Harvard, you don't graduate from Harvard being a slouch and lazy and not calling, and letting somebody know you're running late or whatever the case may be. Her friends from work contact her brother, and because they know her brother and Laura were really close, and they ask him, hey, have you seen Laura? This is what's going on. And he says no, so they reach out to the police. The police are talking with her brother, and they're asking him, do you know of anybody that may want to harm your sister? And he couldn't think of anybody that would want to hurt her, so he said no. He said she was such a caring person and loved by everybody, so he couldn't think of anybody that would even remotely want to cause her any harm. Police asked him again to think hard if Laura had mentioned anyone or anything strange that had happened recently. And her brother mentioned that they recently had a gardener that his mother hired from a church Bible study and that Laura thought the guy was creepy and made her feel uneasy, but he was fired for allegedly stealing some tools from their shed and hasn't been seen since. And that was about all her brother could think of. Of course, what do you think the police are going to look into?
Well, this guy, right?
The gardener. Very good. Look at see,
right,
you missed your calling, man. You could have been a top-notch investigator.
True detective work here. My question is Hadden the guy?
Is he the gardener?
Is he the gardener?
Well, are you reading my script? Because guess who the gardener turned out to be?
Well, you told us about Jeff and you told us about Michelle and her dad, and now you jumped over to Laura and Penny. I'm following names. And now Laura's gone missing, and Laura's sibling has no idea and thought, hold on, they're within 20 miles. So pieces were connecting for me. So I'm going to go ahead and take a Sherlock Holmes award for this one, but I'm going to guess that I'm right, and Hadden was the guy.
Hadden turns out to be the gardener, but the police don't know this yet. So the police investigate the house, but find nothing. They comb the neighborhood looking for any clues and find a pair of women's shoes and a bloodied pillowcase in a wooded area not far from Laura's house. They talk to the neighbors and ask if they saw her or if they noticed anything strange that day. They all said no, with the exception of one Hispanic woman who mentioned that she had seen Laura earlier that day. File that. That's all I'm going to say. If that was the case, then whatever happened must have happened between the time she was seen and supposed to leave for work that morning. Maybe she got up, decided to take a jog around the neighborhood before she went home, showered, and went to work. Maybe she was just taking out the garbage. She wasn't specific in what Laura was doing when she saw her, but she was seen Monday morning before work is basically, I guess, the point that's to be had there. All right. So still, that doesn't leave the police with anything really to go on. So they decide to speak to the gardener. The gardener's name is, go ahead. Here's your time to shine. What's the gardener's name?
Guy's name is Hadden.
Hadden Clark.
Hadden Clark.
There it is. Yes, the same Hadden Clark that was questioned in Michelle Dorr's appearance.
I told you he had evil eyes. Just one picture. I'm like, man, this guy's okay.
Hadden Clark was born into somewhat of a privileged lifestyle. As a child, he would spend his summers in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, basically Cape Cod, at his grandfather's home with his two brothers and his sister. This is the house that he was hanging out at.
Dude, scary guy grew up in that house?
He didn't grow up there, but it was his grandfather's house. He basically spent his summers there.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home away from home. Damn.
And Cape Cod
kind of has an Elm Street look too, though, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, like there's flies on the windows and shit. You know, get out. That stuff.
That's Amityville, right?
Doesn't matter. It's all the same friggin' house. Something tells you to get out and you can't see it.
You leave.
It's for sale.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. So anyway, his neighbors recalled that the entire family was odd and that Hadden made the other kids feel uneasy. They said he was small, scrawny, and was often bullied and picked on. He also had an affinity for dressing up as a girl. His father had wished that Hadden was a girl and probably played a big part in why Hadden likes to dress as one today. He liked dressing up so much that one day one of his neighbors came home to find Hadden in his house wearing his wife's clothing.
The Hadden's a grown man, right?
Yes, he's a grown man at this point.
It's a grown man. Homie comes home, finds a dude with a beard wearing his wife's clothing. Well, I don't even know where your mind goes. First of all, like, what are you doing in my house? And then immediately you're thinking, not only are you in my house, but you're dressing up in my wife's clothes. There's a lot of different things that go through my mind, and calling the police probably isn't one of them. You know what I'm saying? It's more I'm gonna shoot this mother, and be done with that. Yeah.
I don't know what this guy did, but he said Hadden ran out of the house screaming and was upset.
As if to say, you've ruined my tea party. Thanks.
Then, in 1982, when Hadden was 31, he joined the Navy and was stationed as a cook on a ship. Needless to say, his affinity for dressing as women wouldn't go unnoticed. He was constantly being harassed and made fun of until one day they beat him so bad that it caused serious head trauma. As a result of the beating, in June of 1985, Hadden was discharged from the Navy and diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic.
Are they saying that due to this beating, it led to that, or it was connected to his diagnosis, or this is just who he was, period?
No, I think what happened was he took that beating, had such bad head trauma from it. Obviously they were testing his mental acuity at some point. I'm sure they did. And at that time they realized, hey, this guy's a paranoid schizophrenic. I don't know if that triggered it or if that caused it or whatever it is, but I tend to think, no, he probably was always that before it, but before the beating, but they discovered it from the beating.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, so it certainly
that's my assumption.
But that's kind of what loosened the cap on the pill bottle, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, So also that same year in 1985, his brother Bradfield Clark was convicted of murder. So this is Bradfield Clark.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me tell you, this guy, he's a wonderful human being.
He's wearing, he's donning the orange garments. Yes.
I'm just going to say, don't ever go out to dinner with this guy. And I'm going to tell you why right now. Okay.
Okay.
So buckle up. This one's going to be a little sick. I'm telling you right now. He had invited a coworker and her husband over for dinner one night the year before. His coworker's husband wasn't able to make it, and so she ends up going alone. Something happened at the dinner, and Bradfield ended up killing her. He then cut her up and put her in bags in garbage bags, and then put her in the trunk of his car. When police investigated, they found evidence at the scene that indicated he had cannibalized her before putting her into the trunk.
So he killed her, he cut her up, and then he ate her. This is Bradfield.
This is Bradfield, Hadden's brother.
Yeah,
yes.
Hadden's brother. Okay. Suspected kidnapper has a brother who likes to eat people.
So a few years later, in December of 1988, Hadden moved to Bethesda and rented a room from a family. When his lease was up, the owner explained that he would not be renewing Hadden's lease and that he would need to find a new place to live. This upset Hadden, so before he left, he killed the family's cat and booby-trapped the house by rigging up a bucket of oil that would fall on the family when they opened the door.
It's like Stephen King's It meets Home Alone.
Yeah, well, I'm not done. And if that's not bad enough, he wrapped dead fish carcasses in newspaper and hid them all around the house so when they rotted, they would stink up the joint.
He was creative. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, dude was a mess. So a few months later, when he was actually arrested for theft, he was caught dressing as a woman and going into churches and stealing the purses and the coats from all the local churches around the neighborhoods.
Well,
one night after his heist, he goes into the church. He dresses up in chick, goes to the church, steals the purses, and then he takes off and he pulls over into a park, and he's rooting.
That's where he does his rummaging, huh?
Yeah, he's rummaging through to see what he finds, and a cop sees him, comes up, sees something suspicious, and he's you're going to jail. So they throw him in jail, and he serves a total of, you ready for this? 45 days. And that's it. And almost immediately after getting out of prison, he joined a local Bible study group. He took a number of odd jobs around town and was doing his best to stay out of trouble when in 1992, he was hired on as a gardener by Penny Houghteling, which just so happens to be Laura's mother.
There you
One
go.
of the funny things, though, let me show you this one picture of him. I thought this was interesting. So he wasn't like lighting the world on fire with his brains and everything else. So he was taking any job he can get his hands on. And at one point, he took a job as a courier who was on rollerblades. And he called himself the Rockville Rocket.
He was a courier on roller skates.
Rollerblades.
That's the same
Inline
thing,
skates.
Right? Okay.
Right.
I know you're about to try to school me on the difference between roller skates and inline blades. I understand that one has, 3 wheels and they go in a straight line, and the other one has 4 and they're quads. But it's still a guy running around on wheels on shoes, and he calls himself the Rocket? The what?
Rockville Rocket.
Oh, the Rockville Rocket.
Yeah.
I mean, points for creativity there too, I guess.
Yeah, and just for argument's sake, it's 4 wheels.
Is it 4 wheels on the inlines too? Okay.
Yeah, it is 4 wheels on the inlines as well.
Okay.
He met Penny at the Bible study, and she seemed to take a liking to him regardless of his strangeness. She was caring and nurturing to him and had even given him a key to the house so he could do work around there when she wasn't home. They got along great until Laura returned home from school. Penny was proud of Laura and all that she had accomplished and was over the moon with excitement about Laura coming home and her new job. This meant that Hadden would be second fiddle in Penny's eyes, and that just would not do.
So he was looking at Penny like a mom, like a mother figure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because she was nurturing. And his mom, from what I understand, she was not, she wasn't giving you a cookie if you fell down and scraped your knee. She was, I think her brother or his brother Jeff said that mother would just call him foul names all the time, and beat that into your kid's head. Over time, they're going to believe it. You know what I mean? In this case, the parents are as much to blame for what this kid's about to do. Or he's not a kid anymore. Yeah. But Laura would complain to Penny that Hadden was creepy and that she was actually afraid of him. And Penny finally realized what Laura was telling her was true when she came home one day to find Hadden in the house lurking around Laura's bedroom.
Your daughter's already told you that he freaks her out. Then you come home and find him snooping around her bedroom. The fact that there's more to the story and she didn't just say, you need to leave my house now. Is the rest of it's on her. You know what I'm saying?
Let's see what happens. It's a good point.
Do tell.
This is when she fired Hadden. So exactly what happened.
Okay. It's good.
She threw his ass out.
I could have wrote this.
Yes, you could have. So, she fires him immediately. She throws him out.
Yeah, okay,
so
good.
The police decide to call in a forensic investigator to see if there's some evidence that maybe they didn't see when they first went through. The investigator sprayed the bed with a chemical called luminol that will show invisible blood stains when lit with a black light. Mm-hmm. When they turned on the black light, the entire bedroom lit up.
Yeah.
They knew immediately something horrible had happened to her, so they immediately bring Clark in for questioning and got a warrant to search his vehicle.
Is that not enough to arrest somebody?
Circumstantial at this point. They have suspicion they had enough to get the warrant, but they do have him detained and he's in for questioning. Hadden was evasive during questioning and denied any involvement. His truck didn't produce anything of substance either. However, they did find a number of pictures from a cemetery in Cape Cod. They decided to investigate the cemetery and find that the images are from his father's grave. So this is the cemetery and what they saw. And what you see is in the background, that tall one that's in the middle. That says Clark, but the three headstones that are on the ground, that is his father in the middle and his grandparents on either side of his father.
Okay. So his dad and his dad's mom and dad.
Yeah. Now, I don't know who the Clark is behind them, but the picture
the one
is
with
actually...
the one with the flowers to the right?
No, that's Cook. The one to the left of that, the center, like the tall one. Look at the center headstone, and then
I see the middle one in the middle of the
it.
page. Yeah. Okay.
That's the one I'm talking about. So when they got to the grave, they noticed that the dirt around the grave had recently been disturbed. Yeah, so they immediately, they're assuming Laura was buried there, and they got a warrant to dig up the area of the grave. To their surprise, they found nothing. And on top of that, with him not admitting to anything and them finding really nothing in his truck or at the gravesite, guess what they had to do?
Excavate?
Nope.
Oh.
At this point, they had to let him go. They had nothing to hold him on.
Oh, you're talking about the cops. Okay, yeah.
There's nothing to hold him on, so they had to let him go at this point.
It's all circumstantial, and you don't have anything that will stick.
No.
Yeah.
So the police are stumped, but they're not giving up, and they finally get a break.
Okay.
A chemist is able to actually pull a fingerprint off of that pillowcase they found, the one by Laura's house, and it just happens to match Hadden Clark.
Okay.
Also, while doing some more digging, they find a check that Hadden had written to a local store where he purchased some baling twine and duct tape. In the memo field at the bottom of the check, he had one word written on it: Laura. So he put her name on the bottom of it. Police immediately grab a warrant and arrest his ass. They throw him right in jail.
Yeah.
Clark's mother catches wind of this arrest, so she comes into town and she goes to the police. The police are expecting her to freak out a little bit, be upset, and accusing her of, what do you do with my boy? You're accusing my son. And because remember, they come from like kind of a little bit of a prestigious background. So a little bit snobby. And she wasn't known for being the greatest parent or the nicest person in the world. But actually, she asked what she can do to help keep him locked up and ensure that he would never, ever hurt anybody ever again.
She said this about her own son.
Her own son, yeah. So instead of them, they're waiting for her to start laying into him. And she's like, no, keep him. What do I got to do? How bad do you have to be? How bad do you have to be where your own mother just is going to abandon you like that?
I'm just going to say, like, we were asked his questions. What would you do if you found out your child did something wrong? Would you turn him in? I'm like, no, I wouldn't turn him in. I have a paternal instinct to protect my children from anybody and everything, whether they're right or wrong. It's my job to protect them. This woman's just like, no, fuck this, man. This guy, my son's a bad seed, and he's just out hurting me. So kudos to her.
Yeah, but that's a special kind of evil, though.
It does. It really. I mean, she must be really, really well familiarized, well acquainted with it, to be able to be so. No,
well, from a lot of what I read, she would know. She created him, and I don't mean that she, brought him into this world.
You mean saying like he is like her?
I mean, she. Like I said, she tortured the kids. She called them names every day. She picked on them. Yeah. I mean, they would dress him as a girl to punish him.
I thought that just the dad did that. I didn't know that was his mother too.
No, Dr. Phil's got a chair waiting for her. Let me tell you. Well, it wouldn't take long, and in June of 1993, the police would finally get a confession out of Hadden, even though no body was found. Basically, he admitted to...
You always hear this. I'm sorry, Jim. You always hear this, that there's no body, there's no crime. Right? You hear that. And I don't know if that's true or not, but if without a body, how can you presume someone's dead or whatever? You have no body,
I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know how. I have no idea how they actually moved that through the legal system. So he confessed to the murder, and they threw him in jail, and they actually ended up giving him 30 years for that.
30 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Did they ever link him to Michelle?
We're not done. We're not even close to that.
We're not done. Okay. Oh, there's more. You said this is going to be a doozy. Okay. You were spot on. All right. Detail.
So Angry for being fired and furious that Laura stole Penny's affection from him, Clark entered the house through the back door while Penny was out of town. He slowly made his way through the house where he found Laura asleep in her bed. Quietly, he hovered over her, and when the moment felt right, he pounced on her. He suffocated her, which is probably why nobody would have heard anything, like a neighbor heard her scream or a ruckus or anything.
Right.
Then he took out a knife, sliced her throat before removing her earlobes. Afterwards, he wrapped her up in a sheet and took her body to a wooded area nearby and buried her. He then dressed in Laura's clothing and walked around outside. This is why the Hispanic woman that was initially interviewed said she saw Laura that morning before work.
There you go.
It wasn't Laura. It was Hadden dressed as Laura to throw off the timeline of the murder to make it look like she was alive Monday morning before work. Clark pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in jail. The day before his sentencing, he led investigators to a shallow grave where Laura's remains were found. This is actually just the tip of the iceberg of what police uncovered. So, once again, buckle up. It's about to get nasty. But before I do, if you like what you're seeing so far, please give us a like and subscribe before I freak you out with the rest of the story. That's the truth, man. With Clark now in jail with a confession, the police then had focused their attention back to Michelle Dorr, where Clark was the prime suspect in that once again. They went back to talk to Carl, Michelle's dad, and it turns out he wasn't really clear on the time of events when he first gave his report to the police. See, one of the police captains, or not police captains, but one of the investigators was starting to press him. And he's like saying, Carl, listen, I know myself, when I'm watching the Indy 500 or a race, those can get long. Is it maybe possible you dozed off on the couch, maybe lost track of time, and given the fact that you're going through a custody battle and you didn't want to look like you were being an irresponsible father, that maybe you fell asleep and the timeline's a little different? And so Carl finally says, you know what? That's really possible. And I don't know exactly what time all of this happened and went down. So yeah, that's definitely what happened. Well, that little bit of information there now blew Hadden Clark's alibi that he was at work completely out of the water, because based on his initial timeline that Carl had given, Hadden wouldn't have had time to get out of work and back home to do whatever he had to do to Michelle to get her, out of the picture. Right. Just didn't have the time. But now with this new timeline, more than enough time for Hadden. The new timeline kills Clark's alibi of being at work. They continue to pound on Clark for a confession, but he adamantly continues to deny it. However, he slips. He gets a new cellmate, and for whatever reason, he believes this cellmate is Jesus. And I mean as in Jesus Christ. So,
Lord and Savior.
Yeah, he confesses the murder of Michelle Dorr to his cellmate. This is going to be about his confession, and I'm just warning, this is going to get really bad. What happened was Michelle must have been bored playing in the pool and her dad watching the race, so she took a walk to Elizabeth's house to see if she wanted to play. Hadden answered the door and told her that Elizabeth was upstairs playing in her bedroom, when in fact what had happened was Hadden's brother Jeff had taken Elizabeth out of the house earlier that day and was spending the day away from the house so Hadden could pack up his things and get the hell out of there, because Jeff told him, you need to get out. He had overstayed his welcome, and so Jeff threw him out of the house. Now, Hadden's pissed because he's got no place to go. And when Hadden's pissed, Hadden lashes out. Hadden lured Michelle into the house, and then he took her life. Now, what comes next?
Man. It's a child.
6-year-old child with her entire life in front of her. I mean, innocent. She wouldn't hurt a fly. But unfortunately, what I'm about to tell you next is actually what nightmares are made out of. Because after he killed her, he picked up her lifeless body and moved her downstairs, where he drained her of all of her blood into the basement drain. Then, before putting her into a garbage bag, he took out a knife and removed pieces of her flesh that he would later eat, just like his brother did before him, 1985.
Wow.
Afterwards, put her in the bag, and he just went to work and went on with his day like nothing had ever happened. Yeah, I mean, what do you do?
Is this a pattern of this? Tell me, I forget the difference. Are these patterns of a sociopath or a psychopath?
I don't know.
I want to say a psychopath, though, because they lack empathy, right?
I don't know. This guy checks all the boxes, man. I don't think there's one that he doesn't leave unchecked.
I mean, to be able to do these things and then go on with your day like nothing's happened. Mm.
So Clark still won't give any details on where Michelle's body is. And Carl Dorr, Michelle's dad, he just wants to get his daughter's body, get the bones, whatever's left of her, and give her a proper burial. You know, put her bones to rest. Let her rest in peace.
Yeah.
And
Jesus.
You just feel for him. And I mean, you saw the picture of him earlier. He doesn't look like he's,
no.
You know what I mean? He just looks like a wholesome dad. So, he loved her a ton, and he was hurting. And maybe in this case, his prayers were actually answered, because not long after, Clark agreed to take them to the body, but he did have certain conditions he had in place. He demanded, like he deserves a condition.
Yeah, like he gets to call shots now. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So he demands that he be allowed to wear women's panties, bra, and a wig. Now, how fortunate for you that I have a picture of that. In this picture, that's him in a wig. If you look, that's actually a woman's top. You can't see the bra. But if you look at his belt line, right above his belt, you'll see women's panties sticking out from those jeans.
Okay. And I see the handcuffs. Yeah.
Yep. So
where did they let him wear a watch?
I don't know. Maybe it's just basically at this point, they were like, whatever you need, because if he made a move, they were going to bury him right where he stood.
Yeah. So they bought him just to be able to get to the body. I mean, I guess
whatever they needed to do to appease him. You know what I mean? You want lipstick? Here you go. Earrings, whatever you got. You know, he had carte blanche at that point. So the police dressed him up in women's panties, bra, and give him a wig. Clark led police to a wooded area and said that he had covered her grave with an old mattress. So Clark's walking around anxiously looking, but it had been so many years, anything could have happened to the mattress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That thing is not going to last that many years. That's all fabric.
Yeah, maybe the springs would, but somebody probably would have taken it.
You are Sherlock Holmes, because one of the detectives sees what looks to be a piece of spring or metal from the mattress sticking out of the ground. He called Clark over, and he ran over to the spot dripping with excitement. Like a kid on Christmas morning, he was excited. He gets to the spot, and he immediately drops to his knees, and he's clawing at the ground, like all excited, like a savage, clawing at the ground, clawing. And all of a sudden, a pink piece of fabric emerged from the ground, and he stopped, and he looked up at everybody like he's proud. Like, look what I did. Look, I solved the puzzle I created. You know what I mean? So he's freaking out, excited. And one of the detectives, she said, everybody that was standing there just started bawling. I mean, how could you not? So if I'm not mistaken, this is actually the site. So that's a little toy.
Yeah, so it looks like it has eyes or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little toy, like a little horsey or something like that. And that is the wooded area. And in the back, if you can see it, I don't know if you can, but you can see like a Little doll sitting up there back there.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I don't think that's the way it was when they found it, but I think people have put stuff there, ever since.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like a memorial marker? Like
maybe something like that. I'm not sure. Yeah. Clark would actually be sentenced to another 30 years on top of the 30 he was currently serving for Laura's death. So, and those were running consecutive. They weren't running concurrently. Okay. But believe it or not, there's still more. Now, fearing that there could be more victims that were just not known at the time, the police started pressing Hadden for more information. So he never admitted to anyone else. However, he did lead the police back to his grandfather's home in Cape Cod, the one where he spent his summers as a child. Mm-hmm. Behind the house and set back a bit was a shed that they had nicknamed the Wiki Hut. This is the Wiki Hut.
The Wiki Hut. Okay.
The Wiki Hut. Yep. So that's the Wiki Hut.
Oh, Jesus. That looks spooky.
Mm-hmm.
A bit ominous.
So, yeah, it looks probably just like all the lawn equipment and stuff like that. But, as kids, you always find something to play in that you're not supposed to be in. And they were probably playing in that shed and weren't supposed to be back there.
Probably.
But buried in the ground behind the Wiki Hut was a bucket.
Okay.
Inside the bucket were pieces of jewelry, tokens, and trophies from those that crossed his path. Yeah. They found items belonging to Laura, along with an assortment of approximately 200 other pieces of jewelry and bones.
200?
Yeah. And bones from a third unidentified victim.
Wow.
How many people in total? They don't know. FBI profilers estimate the count somewhere as high as 22. They don't even know how many people he's killed. He's not admitting anything, although he did do somewhat of a confession to his new roommate, but he'll never get out of jail.
Well, and that's the point. So, and I asked that. So I know that you're trying to rationalize. I'm trying to rationalize within the irrational, but you know that you're serving 2 life sentences. 60 years consecutive or congruent or whatever, consecutive, right? You're not going anywhere. You're just going to die in prison. You've just got to be a son of a bitch to not give some peace to the families of the other victims. Unless he literally is just like, I don't remember who they were. I just did it, But what do you have to gain by holding on to that?
I don't know. I don't, he's not mentally well. So it's kind of hard to apply our logic to him because, in his mind, whether he knows right from wrong, it feels right. And, I'm sure to a certain extent, it's the wires are crossed, man. He's not firing on all cylinders up there. So,
what's great is that the moments that I doubt my own, walk in life, these little conversations you and I get to have for about an hour, they bring me back to center and I feel pretty good about myself. So thank you for that.
Oof. I don't know. If I'm bringing you back to center, your meter might be broken.
I feel like, what? I'm not that bad of a guy. Cause when the guy cuts me off in traffic, the things in my head I want to do. Of course you'd never do them because, we're not sociopaths. Right. So, yeah.
Right. They have words for that, and you do things like that and you will find yourself with an awesome cot and 3 squares a day as well.
That's it.
And Bubba
and my own roommate.
So, or you could end up with this guy in jail. That'd even be worse. Yeah. But anyway,
him or his brother.
Yeah, he is done. So that's it for the story. So if you guys stuck around till the end and you liked what you saw, please give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the Shadowlands.